He takes you into that sweat lodge after being on, quote, a vision quest out in the desert by yourself.
People would deprive themselves of water. People would deprive themselves of food, deprive themselves of sleep.
So essentially the whole thing turns into a steam room in the dark. You're not supposed to leave. When we were in 2007 in the sweat lodge with him, I could clearly see that this was not good. I mean, even at that one, many people were sick, throwing up, confused, severely dehydrated.
This is True Crime Arizona, the podcast.
Sedona is an incredibly beautiful place. And that draws a lot of people there, a lot of outdoor activities and hiking and things like that. I think outdoor beauty and the accessibility to it brings in people who believe in these vortexes and outer dimensions and, things like that.
What is a vortex?
From what I know, a vortex is a location where people can go into different dimensions. And there are vortexes allegedly around the Sedona area that people would go to for those kind of things.
In 2009, Sedona, Arizona made Scott Masher's job unique.
There were, lots of UFO calls and the Red Rock Yeti, you would get these calls as a deputy and respond. Of course, you respond to whatever the calls are, but nowhere else in the county was I getting those kind of calls.
He was captain of the Investigations Bureau for the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. Later, he'd go on to become the sheriff.
It was not uncommon for me as a deputy in Sedona to meet people from all over the world.
About an hour and a half north of Phoenix, this city is truly one of a kind. For years, news reporter and anchor Jared Dillingham has watched those seeking certain spiritual energy flock to Sedona, only getting even more popular with the likes of Instagram and social media that show off views you just can't get anywhere else.
You can understand how people would be just captivated and feel something spiritual just by walking out there, seeing the colors and the landscape and everything like that.
It almost
There's nothing
looks
like
otherworldly
Yes.
or like another planet,
100%.
maybe.
For this investigation, my photographer Shane and I packed up our things to head up and see what we could find for the day that could just give us more insight into how this story unfolds. Just driving around, we noticed certain things.
We wanted to go to one of these areas where these vortexes are. One of them is here at Bell Rock, and people say the energy is so strong here that it actually makes the cypress and juniper trees here grow from the ground up in a twisted way.
We wanted to stop in town, where the shops and restaurants are, and ask people what they thought of Sedona and what brought them here.
Sedona is a place where God is very present, where the Holy Spirit is incredibly obvious, and synchronicities run wild.
I've been vacationing here every winter in February for like the last 15, 20 years. No matter where you go, you see these beautiful red rocks. Any hike you go on, it's gorgeous.
The last time I came down here, I went to several of the vortexes, but I'm not into the mineral healing, so I love mineral collecting.
You're gonna find artists here of all kinds that are working with the Holy Spirit, that are letting it flow through them freely, that are receiving love, giving love openly, and they wanna share it. Unbelievable views, it looks like it was chiseled, geometrically perfect, put in place, flawless.
Knowing what Sedona has to offer, it was no surprise to the Brown family that Kirby would sign up for James Ray's event there. This place totally fit her.
She, surfed, she was a rock climber, she loved being out in nature, she loved being with people.
She was always very strong-willed, an adventurer, always on the move, high activity level, super curious, and interesting. She was interesting and she was really fun.
Kirby's mom, Ginny, had her hands full with her firstborn, sometimes in the best ways.
I often say she was drunk on life. She loved life. And that's true from the time she was very small. She was somewhat challenging throughout adolescence because she was that risk-taking adventurer. So as a mom, that would give me heart palpitations at times. But she also had great bravery. And I always admired that about her.
She was quite a bit older than her little sister, Jean. They had a 12-year age gap.
She started university when I started kindergarten, so, she would do things like come home and surprise us for the holidays and that kind of stuff. So we sort of relied on Kirby to kind of organize us as siblings, I think. She was kind of a larger-than-life sort of figure for me.
In that summer of 2009, Kirby spent a lot of time with her family. Those memories would later become extra special. In early October, she'd head to Sedona for James Ray's Spiritual Warrior event.
Despite the few things you thought were kind of odd or concerning about James Ray and his events, did you have any concerns about her going to Sedona for this?
No, she felt like this was an investment in herself, and it was very important to her.
This was no small investment either.
The Spiritual Warrior event was about $10,000.
That was $10,000 per person. At the time, the Browns didn't know how much Kirby had spent on it. They learned she had taken out her life savings to pay for it.
Had I known how expensive it was, I would have questioned her, but she never revealed that to me.
It's an Arizona resort that offers spiritual healing.
The 5-day retreat would take place at Angel Valley, like it did each year, a place nestled between Cornville and Sedona that was meant for spiritual retreats like this. 13 years later, it's still in business. Shane and I headed that way to see what it looks like.
So we're trying to get to Angel Valley right now, and we didn't really know what to expect, where it was going to be, but we're right off that main highway. You turn onto this rocky road, and I mean, it feels super rural.
Yeah, we've seen campers out here. There's a lot of things going on.
The name Angel Valley is fitting. You have to go down a large hill into a valley to get there. When you look up, you have peripheral views of the famous red rocks. It's extremely remote. We couldn't get all the way down to the buildings on the property because their main access gate was closed. So we got out and shot some video and observed the area before leaving.
So we're leaving Angel Valley. They were closed due to some transition that they're working on. But I think what the big takeaway was that it's hard to get here, and imagining emergency crews and ambulances trying to navigate this in the dark when everything happened, I mean, it almost seems impossible.
I'm sure most of you listening are thinking what I first thought too. Well, what goes on during Spiritual Warrior? We knew many of his other events were pretty involved with odd activities. So what could this one be? It's got quite the name. Families and the world would soon find out exactly what happened during Spiritual Warrior. To understand a rough timeline of the 5-day retreat, we're going to unravel this chronologically as best as we've been able to understand what took place.
He was going to lead you in these small group exercises. He was going to be one-on-one coaching you, and you were going to find sort of spiritual enlightenment and find ways to get through the challenges in your normal life with him as your personal guide through this 5-day adventure in Sedona.
Ginny Brown learned participants were first asked to do something drastic.
Well, the urgency to have people shave their head immediately, I thought, and I understand that shaving your head is, something that's actually an ancient tradition in spiritual communities, so that to me isn't that shocking. But to be asked to do that as soon as you show up as a sign that you're all in, I mean, right away, that's a sign of subjugation or submission to the person in charge.
James expected the participants to shave their head to show they were all in right from the start. Jared would learn through his reporting one of the first activities involved role play.
There were times when James Arthur Ray would refer to himself as God.
There was another event, I guess you would describe it. I've heard it described as a samurai event. It's supposedly modeled after a movie from years ago where he wore white robes, played the role of God, and his assistants or people on his team would wear like black lipstick and makeup, and they would be like the angels of death. And I think if you did something wrong or violated some sort of rule or policy or something, the angel of death would go over, tap you on the shoulder, and you would quote unquote die for the remainder of that exercise. Wherever you died, you have to like lie there on the ground for many hours.
But Ginny Brown found out what consumed the majority of the days of the retreat, nearly 2 days and 2 nights, was something called a vision quest.
The fact that they did a vision quest without water shocked me. 36 hours without water.
What is a vision quest?
A vision quest is a Native American tradition of going out into the desert alone to just allow yourself to commune with the Great Spirit, to be inspired as to where you're going in your life. And they were encouraged to create a medicine wheel and remain within that circle, which Kirby had done, showing the 4 directions of the compass and honoring the earth and, all these different kinds of symbolisms. They brought things with them to create this medicine wheel.
And this was designed to show you how you can overcome challenges, how you can rely on yourself. It was to take charge, to take a personal responsibility in your life and take the lessons you learned from this vision quest and apply them to the challenges you face in your real world.
Participants wrote down their thoughts, observations, and feelings in journals while they were alone. Ginny and Jean shared some pages from Kirby's journal with me. One page had the word magic written largely at the top. Below, Kirby wrote this:
the ability to create willful change in the fabric of your universe, both spiritually and physically. Namaste.
On another page, she drew her medicine wheel and used earth, water, and fire as elements of her own life to represent transforming, engaging, and seeing results of her actions. She also wrote about life as a river. Parts of that excerpt read,
flow like this elegant river. Be liquid, gently caressing the mighty boulders in the middle of this stream. There is a reason for every boulder to go over or around. Do it gently and happily. Be grateful and give thanks. Sometimes it will be rambling, and other times the river will be wide open and you will be able to slow down and relax as you flow. It all has a purpose.
Her family knew she was buying what James Ray was preaching.
For Kirby, she didn't sleep very much. The eating was off. She was up doing yoga. She was all in. She was playing full on from the time she arrived.
Both Ginny and Jared recalled the exact same story from the Vision Quest. This was October in Sedona. Sedona is already cooler than down in the valley in Phoenix. It wasn't the dead of winter yet, but it was cold overnight. They were outside in the middle of the night on the ground with sleeping bags only, unless you wanted to purchase something.
The participants would later say that James Arthur Ray would offer them the opportunity to buy a Peruvian poncho for an extra $250 that they could take with them. Again, these are people who paid $9 or $10 grand for this 5-day retreat, and he was like, oh, for an extra $250, you can bring this Peruvian poncho out with you on this vision quest. That did not sit well with the family members who came to learn about a lot of this stuff after the fact.
I'm like, are you kidding me? You just took close to $10,000 from these people, and you're going to have them spend $250 for a poncho. I mean, those kinds of small details I just found so egregious.
Little did anyone know it would get even more unbelievable. The participants didn't have much food or water at all before the final event during Spiritual Warrior.
People would deprive themselves of water. People would deprive themselves of food, deprive themselves of sleep, and at the same time go on these strenuous hikes in the Sedona area. And that's what was happening the 4 days prior to the sweat lodge.
A sweat lodge is typically part of a sacred purification ceremony in Native American culture.
And you can talk to any Native American. They go through years of training before they ever set off on something like this on their own. You may have all heard about sweat lodges. Well, you haven't been in a James Ray sweat lodge. This is going to be extreme.
Did you ever go to a spiritual warrior event?
Yes, we did. We were there in 2007 in the sweat lodge. And of course, we had many of our friends in 2008 and 2009. What I saw already in 2007 alarmed me.
Connie Joy was not at the spiritual warrior retreat in 2009, but she had been through it all just 2 years prior. And the context she can provide, having gone through the sweat lodge ceremony, is key to understanding the environment prior to what ended up happening in 2009.
When we were in 2007 in the sweat lodge with him, I could clearly see that this was not good. I mean, even at that one, many people were sick, throwing up, confused, severely dehydrated. You also have to keep in mind, he takes you into that sweat lodge after being on, quote, a vision quest out in the desert by yourself with no food for 24 hours to 48 hours. You were sleep deprived, you were probably dehydrated, and certainly didn't have enough food in you. So I was concerned.
I asked Connie what it looked like inside and what her body went through.
He brings you in. There's a big difference in that lodge where you are located. He brings in 8 hot rocks and throws a big 5-gallon container of water on it. So essentially the whole thing turns into a steam room in the dark. And you're supposed to sit there, and he has you sitting there 20, 25 minutes, each round, 8, 9 rounds. You're not supposed to leave. If you leave, you got the loser symbol. I mean, you're more than that. He's sitting right by the door. So to get out, you had to crawl over him. I left after a certain point. I was like, no, this is nuts. When I got outside, I noticed that he's hanging outside in between rounds. He's getting all the cool air. They're handing him water. But he's doing it around the corner so nobody inside the lodge can see that.
You guys didn't get water or air in between?
No, you don't get water. You should get a towel to wipe off. No. And you weren't getting the cool, fresh air of the doorway.
Connie went back inside the sweat lodge to get her husband, Richard. She had to go to the far side of the lodge, where it was noticeably hotter and harder to breathe. Yet still, everyone trusted James Ray.
He promised many times that he would take care of us. He said many times in all years that you may think you're going to die, but you're not. You don't actually think the man's going to bake you to death. It's not logical, so nobody thought that. When you go to get up, you are so dizzy and disoriented. You have a blood pressure crash. You can't see. That's why one of the guys actually climbed into the hot rock pit and severely burned himself. He was going, all he could see, I know what he was looking at. He was looking at the light at the doorway. He's going for that. He doesn't understand where he is anymore. That's how people got trapped. You wanted to leave, but you literally could not leave anymore without severe assistance.
This wasn't the first time people had gotten sick at a James Ray sweat lodge either.
2005 was the first person taken by ambulance to the hospital with heat stroke. And the only reason, again, he was taken was because one of the owners of Angel Valley was the one who called 911. James was so furious that the rules to his staff were that they were never to call 911.
This was Connie's first and last spiritual warrior event. After is where some of the tension began between her and James. She was raising safety concerns back then and warning her friends who were going in 2008.
And we did warn them. We warned them where to sit in the tent, where it would be cooler. We warned them what not to do. We warned them if you need to get up and leave, do not sit there. That he was going to go too hard and too long. Get up, get out, get water, get air. James was, to my knowledge, never trained at all. He was winging this, and this was way too dangerous of a thing to be winging it. Even being in a sauna, and I was used to it, nobody would tell you to stay in one for 2 to 3 hours. I mean, that's what he was expecting you to do. Because of that, I warned people, which was a big no-no. You weren't supposed to ever talk about an event, about what was going to go on at that event. The answer from James was you have to let them have their own experience. But this bothered me. I actually even talked to the head person at James Ray International and told her I was very concerned, this is not okay. And I know that got back to James and he was not happy with me about it, but I didn't care.
When it came to the 2009 Spiritual Warrior event, Connie and her husband thought about volunteering, being there to help the participants. But that argument Connie and James had in Peru about the dangerous hike, combined with the fear she had from the 2007 Sedona experience, was enough for Connie and her husband to be completely done with these kind of events. James didn't think they were serious. I mean, they were part of his inner circle.
We'll see you in Sedona. We'll hash this out. We can work this out, Connie. It's not a big deal. And that's when we said, no, we're not even coming to Sedona.
That may have been the most important, yet most haunting decision Connie would ever make in her life. Next time on True Crime Arizona, the Sedona Sweat Lodge deaths.
It was one of the most bizarre nights in the newsroom because we heard some traffic over the scanner, but it was so unclear what was going on up there.
It was pretty chaotic. There was a lot of medical staff there. And I thought, gosh, there must be all the medical first responders from that whole Sedona area.
He doesn't seem to understand that all the things he did made death inevitable.
True Crime Arizona, the podcast, is hosted by me, Brianna Whitney, and produced by Sergio Hernandez. This episode was edited by Shane Egan. It's a production of Arizona's Family, 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.